She dropped her fork. The sound echoed like a gunshot across the dining table. My sister stared at me, eyes wide, mouth open. "Wait, you have $12 million?" she said, loud enough that the entire room froze. And before I could even breathe, before I could explain a thing, she stood up and pointed at me like I was some kind of criminal. "He stole it! He doesn't have that kind of money. That's not his. It can't be." And just like that, my entire family turned toward me. Forks down, smiles gone. It was as if I had committed a crime by succeeding. I'll never forget that moment, because I walked into that dinner hoping to reconnect with my family, hoping maybe they finally saw me. I'd spent years being the black sheep, the disappointment, the one they never invited to birthdays or holidays. I thought maybe things had changed. But no. The second they heard I had money, real money, their love turned into suspicion. Their hugs turned into interrogations. And their loyalty? It vanished like smoke. What happened next wasn't just betrayal. It was a full-blown ambush. And I stood there in the home I used to dream of being welcomed into, realizing I didn't belong there anymore. It started with a text message that felt off. My sister, who hadn't reached out in months, maybe even a year, suddenly messaged me. "Hey, we're doing a family dinner this Saturday. You should come. Everyone's going to be there." I stared at it for a while. We weren't exactly close. In fact, if I'm being honest, I'd always been the outsider. The one they forgot to include in family group chats. The one who found out about baby showers and weddings through social media posts after they already happened. So why now? Why me? Still, something inside me wanted to believe. Maybe they were trying. Maybe after all the years of silence, someone decided to finally bridge the gap. I told myself not to be petty. Show up. Be gracious. Forgive. I replied, "Sure. What time?" Saturday came, and as I pulled up outside the old house we all grew up in, memories hit me like a wave. The front porch still had that cracked tile our dad promised he'd fix 20 years ago. The swing where my sister used to push me still squeaked. I parked, took a breath, and walked in. I wasn't dressed fancy, just neat. Nothing flashy. I didn't want to make it about appearances. The living room was warm with laughter and food smells. People were already gathered. My brother-in-law waved me over with exaggerated excitement, like I was the long-lost prodigal child. "Look who decided to grace us with his presence," he laughed. I smiled politely. My mother gave me a short hug. My father nodded, barely making eye contact. Same old, I thought. Dinner was served quickly. Long table, plates full of roasted chicken, potatoes, fancy salads. Everything looked perfect. People were passing bread and sharing gossip. My niece was telling stories about school. My sister was glowing in her usual queen bee mode, telling everyone about her business ventures, even though I knew they weren't doing that well. But no one questioned her. They never did. Then the conversation shifted to money. It always does. My brother-in-law, trying to impress, started bragging about his new boat. 40-footer, he said proudly, clinking his glass. "Got it for a steal. You should see the interiors, leather seats, full bar, everything." Everyone oohed and awed. Then someone turned to me, maybe out of politeness, maybe out of boredom, and said, "What about you? Still doing that computer thing or whatever?" I laughed. "Still doing it. It's been good." That should have been it. I should have left it there. But I didn't. My sister tilted her head. "What do you mean by good?" she asked too quickly. I shrugged. "I've been investing a bit, made a couple of good moves." And that's when she asked the question, How good? I hesitated. There was a flicker in her eyes, a glint that told me this wasn't just curiosity, it was hunting. But I was tired of hiding, tired of being the humble version of myself just to make other people comfortable. So I said it. 12 million good. The room stopped, literally. A cousin stopped chewing. My dad set his glass down without finishing his sip. My mother blinked once, twice, and my sister dropped her fork. "You're kidding," she said, laughing nervously. I shook my head. "Nope. Been working nonstop for the last decade. Real estate, tech, a couple of pre-IPO shares. Just stayed consistent." She leaned forward. "You have $12 million?" I nodded again, trying to keep it light. Then she did something I never expected. She laughed, loudly, bitterly. And then she said it. "Bullshit. You stole it. There's no way." I blinked. "What?" I asked, stunned. "You? 12 million? Please. You've always been the broke one, the one who borrowed money for gas. You think we forgot? Where'd you really get it?" At first, I thought she was joking, that this was some awkward form of teasing, but her face was deadly serious. And then it happened. Everyone else jumped in. My mother frowned. 12 million? Why wouldn't you tell us before? My father asked quietly, is this even legal? My brother-in-law leaned back like he was doing calculations. If it was inheritance, shouldn't we all get a piece of it? It felt like I was drowning. One second, I was just eating salad. The next, I was on trial. The strangest part? No one said congratulations. No one said that's amazing. No one asked how I did it. Not one person treated me like someone they were proud of. I realized then that the dinner invitation was just awkward timing or a happy coincidence. It was bait. They knew. My sister had seen me in an Instagram post with a high-profile entrepreneur. Someone must have Googled me. They saw the conference, the connections, the Forbes feature buried in an online article. They pieced together the truth and set a trap. This wasn't a dinner. It was a setup. And I walked right into it with a napkin on my lap and trust in my heart. The wine had just been poured. Laughter echoed down the table as my cousin told a story about her toddler stuffing peas in the DVD player. Everyone chuckled. Someone passed the garlic bread. It looked like a picture-perfect family gathering. You would have thought this was a normal, happy family just catching up over dinner. But underneath the surface, something ugly was waiting to crawl out. And it all started with a joke that hit a little too close. My brother-in-law, halfway through his third glass, leaned back and smirked. "Hey," he said, looking at me across the table, "still driving that rusty Honda?" A few people snickered. Someone else added, "Yeah, man, you always were the simple one. No shame in keeping it low-key, though, right?" I smiled, shrugged, tried to keep it light. "Still runs fine," I said, "but I'm thinking about getting something newer." That's when my sister's eyes flicked up from her plate. "Oh?" she said. "Like what?" I looked at her, and something in her tone caught me. It wasn't curiosity. It was suspicion. She wasn't asking about the car. She was probing. "Maybe a Tesla," I said casually, "or something electric." That one sentence changed the atmosphere. I felt it, like the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. The smiles faded just a bit. My aunt stopped mid-bite. Someone's fork hovered in the air. Then my brother-in-law chuckled. "You affording a Tesla now?" He said it with the same tone you'd use to ask a kid if they were buying a rocket to the moon. I shrugged. Things have been going really well lately. Now my sister sat up straighter. "What does that mean?" I paused. And I shouldn't have said it. I know that now. I should have just played dumb, made a joke, changed the subject. But after years of being the invisible one, the broke one, the overlooked sibling, they had no idea what I'd built. I was tired of pretending, so I said it. "It means I've done pretty well. Some investments paid off. Business is thriving." She didn't blink. How well? I hesitated. But something inside me snapped. I'd been playing small for so long. Too long. I was done with it. 12 million well. Silence. I swear the sound of the heater in the wall was louder than the people in that room. A knife clinked against a plate. A baby somewhere in the background made a noise. That was it. Then my sister laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh that says I'm proud of you or that's amazing. It was sharp. Ugly. "No, seriously," she said. "What do you mean?" I replied, "I have $12 million in assets, most of it invested, some liquid, been growing steadily the last few years." She leaned forward, smile gone. "You're lying." My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Because how do you respond to that? I just opened up, dropped my guard, shared something huge, and her reaction was to call me a liar? "Where would you get that kind of money?" She continued. "You don't have a degree. You were broke 5 years ago. You couch surfed after your last job. How could you possibly have that kind of money?" Now everyone else was looking at me differently. I could feel it. Their eyes were sharper, no longer casual or warm. They were analyzing, measuring, weighing, calculating. My mother chimed in gently. "You should have told us. We had no idea things were that serious." My father spoke next. "And where exactly did this money come from? You said investments, but that's a lot. Is it legal?" I laughed, but it was hollow. Yes, completely legal. I worked my ass off. I learned. I failed. I got back up. I started small and stayed consistent. But it was like I was speaking another language. "Did you steal something?" my sister asked, not even blinking. "Did someone die and leave it to you? Was it Uncle Don?" You manipulated him before he passed, didn't you? That was the moment I realized this wasn't about disbelief. It was about discomfort. They were uncomfortable with the idea that I had succeeded, that I'd done something without their help, without their approval, and ended up far beyond what they could imagine. The rest of dinner was a blur. Every question they asked was loaded. Every compliment was sarcastic. My cousin asked if I could lend him some money. My aunt asked if I could fund her new skincare business. My brother-in-law asked if I could help him clean some debt. My sister just stared, arms crossed, doing math in her head, trying to figure out how to take a piece of what I built. And not once did anyone say, "Congratulations." Not one person asked, "How did you do it?" Or "What can we learn from you?" No. All they wanted to know was why it wasn't theirs. That one sentence, 12 million well, turned me from their forgotten relative into a target. And that's when it hit me. They never really saw me. They saw a version of me they could mock, dismiss, or control. The second I no longer fit that image, I became a threat. That wasn't a dinner table anymore. It was a battlefield. The moment the words left her mouth, "You stole it!" the air got sucked right out of the room. It didn't sound like a question. It was an accusation, one that slammed across the table like a hammer. My sister wasn't asking for clarity. She was making a declaration. One meant to shame, provoke, and most of all, dismantle everything I had just said. I blinked, stunned. I looked around, expecting someone, anyone, to speak up. To say, "Whoa, that's too far," or "Come on, give him some credit." But no one did. Not one person defended me. Not even my own mother. Instead, she turned toward me, slowly, brows furrowed, like maybe my sister had a point. Like maybe there was truth behind that venom. "You stole it," my sister repeated, louder now. "There's no way you just earned $12 million. What? Were you scamming people online? Running some pyramid scheme? Huh?" I laughed. A single, dry, disbelieving laugh. "Seriously?" She pointed her fork at me like it was a weapon. "You used to be broke. Like no car, no job, sleeping on a mattress broke. What, you expect us to believe you suddenly turned into Warren Buffett overnight?" I looked at my father. His face was unreadable. Then at my mother, who whispered, "Is this true?" As if I had just confessed to murder. "It's called working hard," I said through gritted teeth. "Learning how money works. Making mistakes, losing it, building it back. I studied. I saved. I took risks." But my brother-in-law interrupted. "What kind of risks? Like illegal ones? We're just trying to understand." No, they weren't. They weren't trying to understand anything. They were trying to corner me, to pin me down like an animal in a trap and figure out how they could explain my success using a narrative that made them feel better about their failures. I stood up, chair scraping against the floor. "I didn't steal anything," I said firmly. "You want to know how I did it? I lived like I was broke for 10 years. While you were out on vacations and upgrading cars, I was maxing out my Roth IRA. I skipped parties, cut cable, drove the same beat-up car so I could put every spare dollar into real estate and tech stocks. I didn't win a lottery. I sacrificed." But they didn't want to hear that. It was easier to paint me as a thief than admit they'd misjudged me for years. Easier to call me lucky or crooked than to face the truth, that they ignored the grind and now they envied the result. Then my sister said the thing that made me realize this wasn't just an insult. It was war. "If you really didn't do anything shady, prove it," she said. "Let us see everything. Bank statements, transactions, show us where it came from. Otherwise, we'll assume you did something wrong." And the worst part? My mother nodded. My own mother. "You have to understand," she said gently, as if this was all reasonable. "This is a lot of money. We need to know you're safe, that you're not getting in trouble." "No, Mom," I snapped. "You don't get to say that. You never cared about my safety when I was broke and eating ramen for dinner every night. You didn't ask about my mental health when I was jobless and homeless and figuring things out on my own. But now, suddenly, you want to make sure I'm okay. Because I have money?" They stayed silent. I wasn't their son or brother in that moment. I was a walking ATM, a pile of dollar signs wrapped in flesh and blood. Then came the whispers. My cousin leaned over to another relative. "There's no way it's clean," she said, not even bothering to lower her voice. "He must have done something shady." An uncle I barely spoke to in years muttered, This is why you don't trust quiet ones. They're always up to something. It was like watching a courtroom scene where I was the defendant, and the entire jury had already decided I was guilty. No trial, no evidence. Just decades of buried resentment now unearthed and sharpened into accusations. And what hurt the most wasn't the attack itself. It was the fact that they wanted it to be true. They needed me to have stolen the money, because if I'd earned it fairly, if I'd actually built it brick by brick while they laughed at me and ignored me and cut me out of everything, then what did that say about them? What did that say about the way they treated me? About the missed opportunities? The arrogance? The times they said I'd never be anything? I could see it in their faces. The way their expressions twisted when I mentioned stocks or real estate. It wasn't confusion. It was rage. Rage that I had proven them wrong. So no, this wasn't about disbelief. This was about pride, about hierarchy, about how I had flipped the family pyramid upside down, and now they were desperate to push me back down. They could have said, wow, tell us how you did it. They could have said, we're proud of you. But instead, they chose envy. They chose suspicion. They chose betrayal. And as I sat back down, heart pounding, I realized this wasn't a dinner anymore. It was an execution. The room turned cold. Not physically, but emotionally. The warmth of family banter disappeared like steam from a forgotten pot. One accusation from my sister had opened the floodgates, and now every single person at that dinner table was treating me like a defendant in a trial I never signed up for. It was supposed to be dinner. Just dinner. But now it felt like I was on a witness stand. No judge, no jury, no legal counsel. Just relatives with decades of unresolved insecurities, armed with assumptions and passive-aggressive questions. My cousin, who hadn't texted me in 2 years, leaned forward and asked, so who gave you the money? Or did you find a loophole or something? Was it crypto? Someone else added, as if that would explain it all. Another asked, did you marry into it? Some secret rich partner? Every question was designed to discredit, not understand. I built it. I said, I worked. I learned. I invested small, reinvested smarter. It wasn't overnight. It was over 10 years of discipline, failures, and silence. But silence isn't a language my family respects. They only believe in what they can control or criticize. Then the real interrogation began. So where did you get the initial money to invest? Did Uncle Don leave it just to you? You didn't tell us when you got that, did you? Why didn't you offer to help out when we were struggling if you had all this money? It was overwhelming. One question after another, slicing through whatever dignity I still held at that moment. They weren't asking out of curiosity. They were building a case. In real time. Against me. They were trying to prove I was selfish, that I had wronged them by not sharing, that I'd hidden my success like it was a crime. And all because I didn't call them the moment I hit my first million and ask, what do you need? My mother finally spoke up. Her tone was quiet, but it carried a sharp edge. I'm just confused, she said. How could you keep this from us? Why didn't you trust your own family? I looked at her. That question hurt the most. Not because it was unfair, but because it was proof she never really saw me. You want to know why? I asked, voice trembling. Because when I had nothing, you all pretended I didn't exist. No one checked in. No one offered help. No one believed in me. I was the screw-up, the failure, the family embarrassment. You all loved that version of me because it made you feel better about yourselves. And now that I have something, suddenly you think I owe you? The room was silent. My father, who hadn't spoken much until then, cleared his throat. It's not about owing, he said. It's about honesty. Family should be transparent. Transparent? This man once told me I should get used to being poor because not everyone's cut out for success. Now, he wanted transparency? I leaned forward and looked around the table. You want transparency? Fine, I worked 16-hour days. I said no to parties, new clothes, and comfort. I lived in a studio with cockroaches so I could save more money. I learned to read stock charts at 2 a.m. while you were watching Netflix. I flipped 2 properties with borrowed money and a ridiculous amount of risk. I turned $5,000 into $500,000 by not spending it on crap I didn't need. I was invisible to all of you the whole time. And now that I made it, you suddenly see me? They stared at me, stone-faced, unmoved. Then my sister smiled, that tight fake smile she gives when she's cornered but refuses to lose. "So," she said slowly, "you're saying you did it all by yourself. No help, no favors, no advice from anyone. Is that what you're claiming?" My blood boiled. "I didn't say that. I said none of you helped." Her face twisted. "Wow, real classy. We invite you to dinner and you insult us." "No," I replied. "You invited me to dinner and turned it into a courtroom." And just like that, the gloves came off. My brother-in-law added, "Well, if it's all legit, then you shouldn't mind showing us the details. Like where it's stored, how much is liquid, just to clear the air." I stared at him in disbelief. Why would I do that? Because if you have nothing to hide, what's the problem? And there it was. The real motive behind all their questions. This wasn't about understanding me. It wasn't about celebrating my growth. It was about control, about access, about entitlement. They wanted to see what they could get, what they could claim, what they could manipulate me into sharing. They weren't proud. They were plotting. And it was at that moment I realized something that shattered me. I had not outgrown their expectations. I had threatened them. My success wasn't a source of joy. It was a mirror reflecting everything they hadn't done, hadn't built, and hadn't become. I wasn't family anymore. I was a resource. And suddenly, I missed being invisible. They all forgot. Every single one of them. Sitting there at that long oak table, sipping expensive wine and picking at their gourmet dinner, forgot who I used to be. Or maybe they never really knew in the first place. They just erased those years from memory, like the struggle had never existed. Like I had simply woken up one morning with a few $1,000,000 in my account and decided to casually stroll into their perfect family world again. But I remembered. I remembered every sleepless night, every microwave dinner, every call that went unanswered when I needed help. I remembered how my sister rolled her eyes when I told her I was learning about investing. I remembered how my father told me, "Get a real job," when I said I was trying to build something from scratch. I remembered sitting on the floor of my one-room apartment, laptop on my knees, body aching from the 14-hour warehouse shift I just came back from, teaching myself how money moved, because no one in my family had ever shown me. They didn't see the hunger, the grind, the humiliations I swallowed just to survive. I was the ghost in the family, the afterthought, the one who always showed up last, who got the leftover Christmas gifts no one wanted, who sat at the edge of every photo, if I was even in it at all. When I started flipping things, small items at first, electronics, refurbished phones, they laughed. "You're wasting time," they said. "That's not a real business." When I turned a $500 flip into $1,500, no one clapped. When I bought my first rental property through a combination of sheer luck, dogged persistence, and a very sympathetic bank, no one said a word. But when I said the words 12 million across that dinner table, suddenly everyone had a memory to share. Now they were interested. Suddenly they were curious about how I got so smart. As if I hadn't always been capable, just never taken seriously. Not by them, because to them, I was always the underachiever, the experiment gone wrong, the one who couldn't finish college, the one who wore the same sneakers for 5 years. My success didn't compute in their mental version of who I was supposed to be. So instead of asking how I did it, they went straight to what they thought made more sense. I must have cheated. They didn't remember the version of me that stayed up all night watching investing tutorials instead of clubbing. They didn't remember when I sold my TV just to pay for a new online course. They didn't see me wake up at 4 a.m. for a shipping job, then stay up till 2 a.m. learning about rental markets. They didn't see me stretch a $50 grocery budget for 2 weeks. They didn't see the depression, the tears, the rejections, the days I didn't leave my room because the world felt too heavy. And they sure as hell didn't see the nights I stared at my bank balance, wondering if I'd have enough to pay rent. No, they didn't remember any of that. They only saw the Tesla I drove up in. They only saw the clean watch on my wrist. They only saw the number I casually mentioned, 12 million, and then forgot every single step that came before it. But I didn't. I remembered when I asked for help, and no one picked up. When I invited them to celebrate my first apartment, and they never came. When I talked about a business idea, and they said, "Sounds like a scam." I remembered being the joke, the cautionary tale. "Don't end up like him," my uncle once said at a barbecue, pointing at me while everyone laughed. And now they leaned in with forced smiles and fake laughs, asking, "So what's your next big move?" while their eyes scanned me for weakness. For an entry point. But I've learned. See, people don't get jealous of money. They get jealous of growth, especially the kind they never believed you could achieve. They couldn't believe I had outgrown the version of me they were comfortable mocking, the version that made them feel superior. Because if I had grown on my own, then it meant they were wrong. And their pride couldn't accept that. So they buried the past. They forgot the long road, the cold nights, the self-doubt. They forgot I clawed my way through hell on my hands and knees while they watched from the comfort of their stability. And now that I'd climbed out, they wanted to pretend I had wings. No, I had scars, invisible to them but real to me. And those scars, they're why I don't owe them an explanation. They didn't invest in the pain. They don't get to profit from the result. It took me a few days to piece it together. At first, I thought the dinner invitation was random. Awkward, yes, but maybe an honest attempt to reconnect. I thought maybe they missed me. Maybe they wanted to check in after years of distance. I even told myself, give them a chance. People can grow. But the moment I said, 12 million, everything changed. And by the time I walked out of that dinner, I could feel it in my gut. Something was off. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just the questions or the fake smiles or the way their voices suddenly carried an edge. It was the energy, the way they looked at me after that, like prey, like an opportunity. Then I got the confirmation. A friend from high school messaged me out of the blue. "Hey, just saw your name in a post from the Wealth Talk conference. You spoke there? Crazy." I froze. That post had only been up for a few days. I hadn't shared it on my personal pages. It had been tagged by the conference's social media team, and only someone snooping would have found it. And then it hit me. My sister had known about the money before the dinner. She didn't find out at dinner. She planned that dinner because she already knew. I remembered the way she asked about my job so directly, the way she leaned in when I mentioned things were going well, the way she pushed and pushed until I said the number out loud. It wasn't curiosity. It was confirmation. She was fishing for leverage, for ammunition, for evidence she could use to tear me down or twist the story. That dinner was never about family. It was a setup, a stage carefully prepared with the whole family cast as the jury and me as the unknowing witness. All she needed was my confession, and I walked right into it. I started putting the pieces together even more. My cousin had mentioned that she'd been wondering how I was doing lately. Someone else said they heard I'd moved into a nice place. None of these people had ever called me before. I hadn't spoken to most of them in years. But suddenly, they were all present, all eager, all suspiciously interested. She'd talked to them before I arrived. She'd told them something, maybe everything. She painted a story before I even stepped through the front door. Probably something like, he's hiding something. He's rich now, and I bet he didn't get it legally. Just watch. So the interrogation wasn't spontaneous. It was orchestrated. That's why they had so many questions ready. That's why no one blinked when she accused me. That's why they all jumped in so quickly, as if they were playing roles they'd in Amherst. But here's the part that twisted the knife. They didn't just want to know where the money came from. They wanted to own a piece of it. That entire evening was a soft launch of a heist. Emotional manipulation dressed as concern. Guilt masked as family conversation. Their goal wasn't to understand me. It was to corner me, break me, and carve out what they thought they were entitled to. Because deep down, my success made them feel small. My growth made them feel inadequate. They had all written me off years ago. The dropout, the broke one, the dreamer with no follow-through. They had used me as a cautionary tale. Don't end up like him. But now I had become the exception, the very kind of success story they said I'd never be. And that enraged them. It didn't fit their narrative. So rather than celebrate me, they set the table for an ambush, pretended it was a dinner, laughed, toasted, smiled, and then flipped the table the moment I confirmed what they'd already been whispering about behind closed doors. And what's worse, they thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd be so desperate for their approval, so eager to finally be included, that I'd sit there and take it, that I'd feel guilty, that I'd offer them money or access or proof, that I'd fall into their trap and try to win their love back by buying it. But I didn't, because the moment I saw their faces change, really saw them, I realized something that hit me like a freight train. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that needed them. They missed the brother who was struggling, who needed favors, who stayed small so they could feel big. They didn't miss me. They missed control. And now that I had something they couldn't take credit for, something they couldn't understand or influence, they treated me like the enemy, like a threat, like a stranger. So I walked away. Not just from the dinner, from the illusion that these people were ever rooting for me. And let me tell you something. Nothing will ever prepare you for the moment you realize your own blood would rather destroy your reputation than admit they were wrong about you. But I was prepared for something they weren't. Silence, distance, independence. They built their dinner like a trap, but they forgot. I built a life like a fortress, and I don't let snakes inside. After that night, the texts started rolling in. It was almost laughable. People who hadn't spoken to me in years, relatives who didn't even remember my birthday, were suddenly remembering my number. Suddenly, I was cousin, bro, fam. Hey man, crazy seeing you again. We should catch up soon. Just us. Yo, heard about what happened at dinner. Don't listen to them. I always knew you'd make it. Hey, I got this business idea I think you'd love. Just need a little investment to get started. And then came the bold ones. Look, if you have that kind of money, maybe you could help out the family. You know, we're blood. You've always been so generous. Just $20 would help us get back on our feet. I'm not asking for much, just a loan. Promise I'll pay it back. That's when it all came full circle. It was never about whether I stole the money. That was just the first strategy, the opening move. When that didn't work, when I didn't flinch, didn't break down, didn't hand over account passwords or records, they switched tactics. Guilt. They tried to turn my success into a burden. My $12 million became a weight I was expected to carry for everyone else. Suddenly, my family didn't see me as the guy who beat the odds. They saw me as the golden goose. And what do people do with a golden goose? They don't feed it. They don't protect it. They squeeze it until it bleeds gold. I started seeing the patterns everywhere. My sister posted a vague Facebook status. Some people forget their roots once they get rich. My aunt tagged me in a photo from the dinner, writing, "We're so proud of our millionaire nephew. Hopefully he won't forget his humble beginnings." Every sentence had two meanings. The surface was love, but the subtext? Pressure. Manipulation. They weren't proud. I was a trophy now. A walking reminder of what they didn't do. So they dressed it up as admiration, but underneath it was expectation. He owes us. He came from us. So he belongs to us. Let me be crystal clear. I wanted to help. I've always wanted to help. But not like this. Not with strings attached. Not under emotional blackmail disguised as family loyalty. Because true loyalty isn't tested when someone needs you. It's tested when they don't. Where were all these texts when I was broke and figuring it out? Where were the messages when I was on my third failed business idea and everyone called me delusional? Where were the calls when I couldn't afford Thanksgiving and spent it alone? Back then, no one expected anything from me because I had nothing to give. And now that I have something, they want everything. My time, my money, my energy, my guilt. They want me to feel bad for building something without them. They want me to apologize for winning. But let me tell you something that most people don't have the courage to say. Just because we share blood doesn't mean I owe you my blessings. Love isn't a transaction. Support isn't a contract. Family isn't a subscription you cash in on when someone levels up. I didn't build this life to lord it over anyone. I didn't climb out of that pit so I could wave at people from the top. I did it because no one else was going to rescue me. I did it because I had no other option. I did it because I had to. And now that I've made it through the storm, they want me to carry their umbrellas? It doesn't work like that. You don't get to skip the rain and expect a seat in the shelter. So I started saying no, not because I didn't care, but because I finally did about myself. And with every no, The masks dropped. People I called family started showing their real faces. Some said I was selfish. Others said I'd changed. My sister, the one who screamed thief at dinner, sent me a paragraph-long text that ended with, "You owe us more than this. You wouldn't be where you are without us." That line broke me. I wouldn't be where I am because of them. No, I am where I am in spite of them. They weren't the ones cheering me on when I stayed in on weekends to study. They weren't the ones dragging me out of depression when I lost my first investment. They weren't the ones holding my hand when I was $300 from eviction. I held my own hand. I built this life. I earned it. So no, I don't owe anyone a cut. I don't owe a single explanation. And I'm done letting guilt be the currency that buys my peace. The golden goose didn't forget where it came from. It just realized not everyone who clapped for it was really clapping. A week after the dinner, my sister showed up at my door. No warning, no call, just the sharp knock of someone who believed she had the right to enter my life whenever it suited her. I opened the door, confused, and there she stood. Arms crossed, eyes cold, expression calculated. She didn't even pretend to smile. "Can we talk?" she asked flatly. I stepped aside. "Sure." She walked in like she owned the place, looked around my living room, eyes scanning everything like an auditor. She noticed the subtle signs of success. Minimalist furniture, clean design, high-end finishes, no gold statues, nothing flashy, just quiet power. That bothered her more than if I'd been dripping in diamonds. "You've done well," she said, walking slowly. "Thanks." She sat on the edge of the couch. Her next sentence hit like a truck. "You know, the family's really upset with you. They feel hurt, disrespected." I blinked. "Hurt?" She nodded. "You acted like a stranger at dinner. You didn't trust us. You made everyone feel like you were better than them." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Just a single sharp burst of disbelief. I made them feel like I was better than them? Really? She leaned in. "You walked in here with $12 million and zero humility. You didn't share. You didn't offer. You didn't even say thank you to the people who raised you." That's when I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was a negotiation. Or worse, a threat with a smile. "They're family," she continued, "and families help each other. They're thinking maybe we should all sit down, come up with a way to make this right. Split things up a bit, create balance." There it was, the real reason she came. Not to apologize, not to understand, not to reconnect. She came to claim something, like I was holding money that belonged to them. Like I was a traitor for not immediately divvying up everything I earned through a decade of blood, sweat, and silence. I stood there, looking at her. This woman I'd shared bunk beds with as kids, who used to steal my Halloween candy, who ignored every text when I was broke, but suddenly remembered me the moment my bank balance hit 7 digits. "Let me ask you something," I said quietly. "Where was all this unity when I had nothing?" She frowned. Where was this family when I needed rent money and couldn't get anyone to reply to a text? Where was this sense of togetherness when I was eating canned beans for dinner and walking 5 miles to work because my car died? She didn't respond. I stepped forward. "You talk about humility, but tell me, how humble were you when you laughed at my dreams? When you told people I was a joke? When you threw parties and never invited me because I didn't fit in with the rest of you?" Still nothing. "You're not here for balance," I said. "You're here for control. You want a piece of something you didn't help build. You want to rewrite the story so you're not the one who ignored me when I needed you." That's when her eyes changed. She dropped the calm act. The veneer cracked. "You've changed," she hissed. "I had to," I replied. Because staying the same would have kept me small. Staying the same would have left me begging for crumbs at their table. Staying the same would have meant accepting the role they wrote for me, the failure, the burden, the one they could forget without guilt. But I rewrote my story, and now they were furious that they weren't part of the new chapter. "You don't get to come into my life now," I said, "and dictate terms. This isn't your house. This isn't your money. This isn't your victory." She stood up, jaw clenched. "We're family." "And that used to mean something," I said. "But what it really means is, when I was down, you stepped over me. Now that I'm up, you're reaching for a handout. That's not family. That's entitlement." She walked out without another word, And as I watched her leave, a strange calm settled in me. Not bitterness, not anger, clarity. They don't want the story of how I made it. They want to erase the part where I did it without them. And they will try everything, guilt, shame, manipulation, even pretending to make peace, just to pull me back into the version of me that served their comfort. But I'm done playing that part, because you don't owe people access to your blessings when they gave you nothing but silence during your struggle. And sometimes the hardest part of success isn't getting there. It's realizing who's furious you made it. A few days later, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter, white envelope, thick paper, the kind you send when you want something to feel official. It was from my uncle, the same uncle who used to forget my name at family events, the one who laughed at me for working in a warehouse, the same one who once told me some people just aren't meant to succeed. The letter started friendly enough. "We're proud of you," it said. "We always knew you were smart." But by paragraph 2, the real message emerged like poison through perfume. He suggested I do the right thing, that I honor the family, that with my new wealth, it would be a noble gesture to set up a fund. For who? The family, he said. No names, no plan, just a vague sense of obligation, because somehow in their minds, my success had quietly become their inheritance. I folded the letter. I didn't respond. But that's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to guilt me, they were trying to organize. I started hearing whispers from mutual friends, from people back home, that I'd abandoned the family, that I was selfish, that I'd forgotten where I came from. They weren't content with just hating me quietly anymore. They were building a narrative, one where I was the villain. And it was brilliant, really, because you know what makes a better story than someone pulling themselves out of the mud and building something real? A traitor. A sellout. The one who made it and turned their back. It didn't matter that I had once begged for help and was met with silence. It didn't matter that I'd clawed my way out with no guidance, no favors, no cushion. None of that made a good headline. But the black sheep suddenly becoming the golden child? That was threatening. So they flipped the story. They made me the problem. They said I was ungrateful. They said I was arrogant. They said I thought I was better than everyone. But the truth was simpler and so much darker. I had proven they were wrong about me, and people hate being proven wrong more than they hate being betrayed. Because when you rise, it forces them to look in the mirror, to ask, what have I been doing? Why haven't I built something? Why did I stop trying? So instead of confronting those questions, they attack the person who forced them into reflection. I became a threat, not because I changed, but because I didn't let their past judgments define me. I didn't stay in the role they assigned me. They needed me to fail, or at least to need them when I succeeded. But when I didn't, when I kept climbing in silence without seeking their approval, they took it as an insult, because it meant they never mattered in my success story. And the truth is, they didn't. They weren't there when I was rejected by 5 landlords for having bad credit. They weren't there when I cried on my kitchen floor after my first business failed and I lost everything I'd saved. They weren't there when I stared at a wall for hours, wondering if I'd made a mistake, trying to escape the path they told me to stay on. But now they were everywhere. In my inbox, in my phone, in my comments, pretending they'd believed in me all along, pretending they'd always known I'd be great, pretending they were owed something because they happened to share my last name. But family isn't defined by genetics. It's defined by presence, by who shows up in your worst seasons, by who claps when you're still planting, not just when you're harvesting. And the truth is, they didn't lose me when I became rich. They lost me when they treated me like I was disposable, when they laughed at my goals, when they ignored my pain, when they whispered about me behind closed doors. My money didn't change me. It just exposed them. And once I stopped shrinking to fit their expectations, they had a choice. Celebrate me or crucify me. They chose the latter. So I let them build their narrative. Let them gossip. Let them sulk. Let them twist the truth until it made them feel whole again. Because while they were busy mourning the version of me they could control, I was busy becoming the version of me they'll never reach. A month after the dinner, I made a decision. I stopped explaining. I stopped defending. I stopped trying to be understood by people who chose not to understand me. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. When people are committed to misunderstanding you, it doesn't matter how carefully you word it, how softly you speak, or how generous you try to be. They'll twist every sentence, rewrite every intention, and weaponize your silence. That's what my family did. They didn't just misunderstand me. They needed me to stay small, because the moment I stood up and said, I made it, they weren't proud. They were exposed. So I went quiet. And the quieter I became, the louder they got. They told neighbors I was greedy. They told friends I was off the rails. They even told extended family that I was dangerous, that the money had made me crazy. Why? Because my existence now questioned theirs. I wasn't supposed to break the mold. I was supposed to fail quietly, stay in the corner, forever grateful for leftover love and third-hand praise. I was supposed to be the warning sign, the one everyone pointed at when they needed to feel better about their own average lives. But instead, I became the outlier. And people don't like outliers. They don't celebrate you when you leave the pack. They isolate you. They shame you. They call you ungrateful. And when they realize you're not coming back, they start rewriting the past. Suddenly, they were the ones who helped me get on my feet. Suddenly, I never would have made it without them. Suddenly, they always believed in me, even when I still have the text messages that said, "You're wasting your life on stupid dreams." They rewrote the narrative to protect their ego. Because if I did this alone, then maybe they missed their chance. And people would rather brand you a villain than admit they gave up on you too early. But I was done playing along. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their fake forgiveness. I didn't need their conditional support. What I needed, what I finally gave myself, was permission. Permission to grow without guilt. Permission to win without apology. Permission to stand tall in rooms they once tried to lock me out of. Because the truth is, I didn't owe anyone an explanation for becoming everything they said I couldn't be. They said I'd fail. They said I wasn't smart enough. They said I was wasting time. And now they say I'm selfish for succeeding. That's the cycle. They doubt you, dismiss you, degrade you, and when you prove them wrong, they say, you've changed. No, I didn't change. I escaped. I escaped the box they tried to trap me in. I escaped the version of myself that waited for their approval. I escaped the shame of wanting more than what they settled for. And that escape cost me something. It cost me relationships. It cost me comfort. It cost me the illusion that family always has your back. But it gave me everything else. Peace, power, freedom. And most of all, the ability to walk into any room without needing permission to exist. See, they tried to turn my silence into shame. They said, if you're really proud of yourself, why don't you talk about it? Because I don't owe the world a blueprint for what I bled for. Because I don't owe my doubters a step-by-step guide on how I climbed out of the grave they dug for me. Because sometimes the loudest flex isn't showing your wins. It's watching people choke on their own words when they realize you did it anyway. That's what I did. Not to spite them, but to save me. I stopped shrinking. I stopped asking for room. I stopped trying to convince them that I was worth loving before I had money and worth respecting now that I do. Because if love has a price tag, then what they gave me was never love. And if respect only came once I had power, then what they gave me was never respect. I built this life from scratch, with cracked hands and tired eyes, with a heart that was broken but refused to stop beating, with faith that looked delusional to everyone but me. And now that I've made it, I won't explain. I won't defend. I won't apologize. Because real power isn't about being loud. It's about knowing you never needed their approval to become legendary. I used to think success would finally bring me closer to my family. That once I made it, once the struggle was behind me, they'd see me differently. That we'd reconnect, heal, laugh again. But what I've learned is that sometimes success doesn't bridge the gap. Sometimes it exposes the cracks that were always there. Quiet resentments, buried jealousy, love that was never really unconditional. And that's the part no one tells you. Success is lonely. Not because you're alone, but because you realize who was never really with you. I didn't get rich to prove anyone wrong. I got rich to prove myself right. That the boy they dismissed was capable of building something unstoppable. that my dreams weren't foolish, that my faith in myself wasn't misplaced. I still love them in my own way. I don't wish them harm, but I've learned to love from a distance because peace costs more than money, and I paid too much in silence, doubt, and rejection to ever go back. So no, I won't dim my light to make others comfortable. I won't explain what they chose not to see. I won't carry guilt for outgrowing the people who stopped growing. I'll just keep walking, quietly, confidently, free, because I earned this life, and no one gets to rewrite my story but me.